I want to turn our attention to a panel discussion. Feel free to ask any questions about men and the stuff they struggle with or the stuff that they need to do. So the first person I will call is none other than the senior pastor of Karura Community Chapel, Rev.George Shiramba. Please, a round of applause for him even as he comes. Please make your way up. Now, Joe, you must start with your boss for you to protect your job. So let him come up. And then finally, not finally, but let me ask also Pastor M, to the senior pastor of Mavuno Church, to please come up and join us here. And then none other than Pastor Emmanuel. For those who have done I Vow, or have known about I Vow, Pastor Emmanuel runs a program for premarital counseling classes, and he was part of Mavuno, I know, at some point, and now the Lord called him to do other things, but please welcome him and a round of applause for him. And then none other than man and his relationships, and he looks happy, he looks like a good married man. You know, please a round of applause for Pastor Mbevi. I think I'll just, first of all, just ask you to first introduce yourself. How long you've been married, you know, and anything else that you want to tell us about you as a man. So we'll start with Pastor Emmanuel, because Pastor Emmanuel hasn't talked today, so you get to hear his voice.
Thank you so much, Josh. Good morning, everybody. Or is it afternoon? Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you, and it's good to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me and having me. As you've heard, my name is Emmanuel Gashanja, and this is how I love to introduce myself. I am first a husband to one Caroline. We've been married to each other for 22 years. Then we have 3 sons together, and then I am now a pastor at Mavuno Church, but also the founder of an organization called I Vow, which seeks to preserve the sanctity of marriage. So it's more than premarital, it's postmarital, and everything marital.
Wonderful. A round of applause for Pastor Emmanuel. Thank you, Pastor. Yes. And then we shall come back to Pastor Mbevi.
Well, I guess the part you don't know is how long I've been married.
Yes, for sure.
I've been now leading Transform Nations and doing those programs we have mentioned. But I've been married for 26 years. It's going to be 27 later this year. So
wow.
It's been a while.
Okay.
3 children, 2 girls and 1 boy.
Wonderful. A round of applause for Pastor Mbevi. Pastor M.
Yeah, my name is Muriithi Wanjau, senior pastor Mavuno Church. Married to Carol for the last 30 years, and we have 3 children, 2 girls and a boy. The first one's about to get married, and so I'm about to become a father of the bride.
Oh, wow, congratulations.
So, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and my name is George Shiramba. I'm one of the pastors here. I'm married to Kanini. We've been married for 25 years, blessed with 3 children, 2 girls and a boy.
Wonderful. Thank you. Let me get right in and just ask a few questions. And today we've been just talking about you. Pastor M, you've talked a lot about muscles and health. I know that also, Pastor Emmanuel, you've been handling lots of couples and relationships. You know, Rev. George, you have been a senior pastor for quite a long time and been able to handle a lot of issues towards families. And also, Pastor Mbevi, you know, relationships has been, I look at all of you and I see relationships, you know, because I think I have had every one of you and your sermons. And so the question I would want to ask, how does a man, you know, men always feel like they are incompetent. Men always feel like they struggle to maintain their relationships. What have you done yourselves to ensure that your relationships are working? Whether marriage or friends and the people around you, what have you done yourselves to ensure that your relationships are working? We can start with Pastor Mbevi.
I thought you would give me a breather, but I would say one thing, because we could say a lot. But I would say for me it's rhythms. That there are certain things we do every week. For example, as a father, there are certain things I do with the children every week. And I've come to learn them every 3 months. There's some things we do together. Every year, there's some things we do together. The same with my wife. Now we have some rhythms of date nights and getting out together and getting to do a staycation. Is that what you call it, huh? Out there and just talk together. So rhythms that I've created over time so that they support. Because sometimes I get busy and I forget, but my children will remind me, we were supposed to do this. Or then my boys that we meet once every week. That has become a rhythm. So if we don't meet, they're going to remind me. So I think for me, rhythms have really helped.
Okay, consistency. Okay, wonderful. Pastor Emmanuel.
All right, I think to add to the rhythms, because that's something I'm sure will be echoed through here. I remember in 2011, allow me to just share a short story. In 2011, my marriage was in shambles, and I thought it was doomed for failure. And I remember talking to this one mentor of mine, and I found a man who I could pour out to, because as a man, you're scared to be vulnerable with people. So I found this one man who I felt this is the one guy I can actually share with, and he will receive my information and handle it with the care that it deserved. So I told him that I want to talk, I just want to just share with somebody the things that I'm going through marriage. So I show up, to his place, and he's one of those really handy people. So he was building stuff, stables for his horses. And so it was an opportunity to play with power saws and, all those tools. So anyway, we are going at it, and we're having fun. So eventually, it's time to take a break. Then he asked me, so what's going on? And I began to now pour out. And he listened to me. And he says, oh. And he had, man of God, she did that. I was like, yes. And I was so excited. And everything in me poured out. And I was just so excited. For the first time in my life, I understood what the ladies feel when they pour out to their friends. Because I'd unburdened. I felt light. And then he told me something that was very difficult to hear. I felt like he had taken his fist and punched my solar plexus. He told me, there's one thing I have learned that I want to impart to you so that you can hopefully use this and turn around your marriage. And he told me that the man or the husband is the one who is responsible for how the marriage goes. And in my head, I wanted to fight with him because I was just like, I'm not responsible for what she did or she didn't do. And he told me, how you lead, how you love will inspire your wife to follow. And so at that point, I realized there are so many things that I didn't know about, being a leader, within the context of marriage. And I started on a journey to learn. And I think one of the first things I heard was from Dr. Miles Monroe, where he said, this is the secret to having successful relationships. And it comes from Proverbs 24, 3-4. And it says, by wisdom, a house is built. Through understanding, it is established. And through knowledge, its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. And I realized I had no knowledge of this space that I was in, whether it was being a husband, whether it was being a father. And I had to start learning. And the more I learned, the more I asked the Holy Spirit for the understanding, I was able now to create the rhythms that have helped me, become the husband that I am, or even serve at the capacity that I am, impacting relationships in the nation and actually around the world.
Wow, thank you. I appreciate that question. Reverend Shiramba, would you want to mention something?
I think for me, it's more a mentor I had. And several of people here, Elder Job Odur or Chris Malwa, passed through the hands of Reverend Norman Dodman. I think just watching their lives kind of helped me a lot in terms of even marriage and relationship. What used to happen is I noticed that Reverend Nordman's wife was called Jean. And whenever we would have a wedding ceremony, when it came to the time of vows, I noticed she would be crying. And I was very intrigued. And so I once asked her, why do you cry when people are exchanging their vows? And she told me, I don't think they know what they are doing. And it intrigued me, and I began to look at their marriage. And I saw how her husband was committed to her and how humble he was, and the commitment. It's like it went beyond emotions and all these ups and downs. But later on in her life, when she was 84 and they were going back to the UK, she got the sugar disease, diabetes. And it's how then he committedly looked after her. And I understood the depth of the vows that we make. They are not light things. And I saw his commitment to her until to the point of where she died. And that became a challenge to me, to look at marriage from the point of vows and also from a larger and wider point of view. Thank you.
Okay. Pastor M.
Yeah, I don't know if I can top that. I mean, it's very similar because what Rev has said about mentors. I think as men, we can operate on the basis of fake it till you make it. And look like you know what you're doing, even though you have no clue. And this is in all areas, whether it's at work, whether it's with parenting, whether it's with marriage. It's very easy to just go, I should know what to do, so I'm just going to do it until I figure it out. But I was so fortunate because I was a young man in a church. So you can imagine a church like this, I was one of those guys who are in their 20s. And it's so important that I speak to the guys who are younger to say, you don't know what a privilege it is to be in a place like this. So what happened for me is because there were older men, I got a chance to have many people who are older than us who really became like an open book. And we sought out, I learned to seek out mentors from a young age. And so we had many couples ahead of us who taught us so much. So I can think of times in our lives when we should have actually crashed. We should have actually gone down. I remember one time, I think 5 years into our marriage, it just felt so bad. There was no joy in the marriage. I would wake up, and you have this feeling of, did I make a mistake? But the problem is, I'm a pastor. Now, just think about all that. I mean, the consequences of that, it's too much. You don't even want to process. How do I unravel these things that I've done, And then I told you how many people came to our wedding. What am I going to do with all that information, It's overwhelming. And I remember at that point, one of our mentors teaching us a very powerful lesson. And he taught us that every married couple that is successful has not been succeeded because of good times. They've succeeded because they survived the tough times. And that you cannot ever have a happy marriage until you go through the tough times. And the reason is because you marry somebody with the idea of what you think they are. Nobody ever knows who their wife is. You marry them with an assumption. The assumption comes from your own ideal. And she does exactly the same. And every good couple that survives, they have to unravel all your expectations and then understand, okay, since I didn't marry who I thought I married, who did I really marry? And then discover your wife anew and actually have a life with a new person, not the one you thought you married. And I don't know why it was such a relief to discover that. Because, you look around at church and you're seeing all these people opening doors for their wives, talking about my sweetheart. Pastors always say the most beautiful woman in the room, and you're wondering, surely all of you say the same thing. It's like they're not unhappy. It's like you guys look like you're so perfect. For me to realize that was such a relief because I realized, I think we're all pretending. First of all, I felt so, I think misery loves company. I felt so good that all of you have suffered. Oh, and the ones who have survived, it's not because you didn't suffer, it's because you learned how to go through that and to look on the other side and to find who you married. So that was just an example of a lesson from a mentor. Okay. And I remember learning that, and I made a commitment, I'm going to teach this to people because nobody had ever taught me that.
Okay.
And so we've had the privilege of just having mentors who've shared their lives and in the process. So I always say as a man, surround yourself with other men who are older than you, who are going where you're going. So if it's at work, in the career world, if it's in church, in the spiritual world, in the marriage world, look for those men who have a good marriage and surround yourself with them and ask them the questions. Try and insert yourself into their spaces. Because when you do that, what you create is what they call a plausibility structure.
Yeah.
Most people don't have that. You see marriages breaking all around you, but when you've got a few good ones, you're like, okay, if they can make it, just like what you're saying, what are they doing to make it?
Okay. Just to respond to, so Pastor M, you talked about big rocks. You talked about big rocks. You talked about our spiritual life being a big rock. You talked about marriages being big rocks for us. There are probably men here who they are big rocks, they don't know what to do with them. You know, they've probably reached a place where they feel, this is no longer a big rock for me. It's probably the biggest rock that they can't even handle. And they don't know where to begin because they're trying to figure out, how do I deal with this big rock? Where do I begin? So what do they do at this point?
And I think that's a place now of asking for help. You know, because again, as men, we're not taught to ask for help.
Yeah.
Just to walk up to another guy who's doing well and to say, I need help. I mean, you talked to your mentor, Pastor Emmanuel was saying, he found an older guy and he said, yeah, this is what my wife is doing. I don't know what to do. And out of that, a nugget came that saved your marriage. And I feel like that's the thing to understand. As men, we need to actually give ourselves the permission to have, you know, when you're learning to drive, they have the thing they call L plate. You stick it on your car. What it tells people is, I'm learning, so please be gracious. I don't know what I'm doing. I think as men, we need to give ourselves the permission to have an L plate. And to be able to say, I've never been a husband before. I've never been a father before. Like for me, I told you, my daughter's getting married in 2 weeks. I've never been a father of the bride before. I have no idea what to do. You know, I don't know. Guys are asking, how are you feeling? You know, as a man, I don't even know how I'm feeling. Like it's just confusing. And just being able to have people who've gone before and say, so how did you handle this? What does that change look like? Who are those men I can talk to and say, how do you start now relating to a son-in-law? What happens when your daughter comes and tells you the husband is not behaving or is not doing right? How am I supposed to deal? I can't fake my way into that. I need to be able to have men that I can relate with and I can ask, how did you do it? And I found that just having such people in my life has been such a helpful thing. So I think the key for me would just be to say to every man, who are those reference points in your life that you can put an L plate with, and I don't have to pretend. I can actually come and say, I don't know, show me.
Hey, well, wonderful, thank you. Pastor Emmanuel, one of the things I love what Pastor Mbevi said, and I thank you for being vulnerable, Pastor Mbevi, that you at one point had an emotional affair. And that's a thing that I know, even as Christian men, we cannot talk about. You know, because of the shame. How can you do that? You're a man, you're a born-again Christian. How would you do that? But I'm just asking myself, you know, how do I disconnect from these emotional affairs? How do I leave these emotional affairs? You know, I probably even it's a sexual affair that you are in. But how do I begin to deal with it so that I'm able to overcome and not find myself back in it?
I wish you asked me Pastor M's question.
I was just thinking, I'm glad it was you who was asked that one.
We can switch. How to live the emotional affairs. I think one of the things I have learned, and I am continuing to learn, is that one of the things we don't understand as men is that we as men have just as much emotions as the woman does. And so the only time we allow that vulnerability sometimes is when there's somebody who is a little bit softer for us to engage with. And that time sometimes will be this woman who adores you, who likes you, and will give you a listening ear. So one of the things that's critical and has been said here quite a bit, I think Pastor Mbevi mentioned it in his, when he was speaking, is how do you surround yourself with men so that there's that need that is being met and you're not looking for it from the woman. But at the same time, it's also how can you build this emotional intimacy with your partner so that you are not seeking for it elsewhere. I learned that one of the things, you know how we men, mwanaume ni kukaa ngumu. So if my wife asked me a question, like, how was your day? I would say, it was good. What did you do? You know, same old, different day. If somebody told me or shared with me something, you know, during the day, I'll say, today I was with Josh, they had a baby. Was it a boy or a girl? I don't know, I just know they had a baby. How tall was he? Was it a C-section, a natural? What are the details? Which hospital? I don't know. The dude just told me they had a baby. I said, I goteed him. Well done, homie, well done. So one of the things I had to teach myself, and this is part of that learning process, was how to build that emotional intimacy with my wife. So there's something that we do during weekdays at the end of the day, is we walk 10,000 steps. And part of the walking that 10,000 steps is physical health. So at least I'm covered with Pastor M. Then the second thing is I've had to teach myself how to have a conversation with her. And in that moment, when I come to that place, I know I'm going to be asked a question, like, how was your day? My answer, default setting, is, it was all right. Same old, different day. But now I've had to teach myself to even now give some more detail. To give some more detail. Like, for example, if she asked me the same, say, Kwanza, today when I was leaving the bed, bana, I wasn't feeling like leaving the bed. Hey, it was warm nicely. You were feeling so good, babe. Hey, Kwani, what were you doing? What did you do different? Then she'll be like, you just, you know. And then it becomes a conversation at, that traffic couple of hours, you know, I saw him. And slowly by slowly, it has come to the point that during these moments, I recently was bereaved by my mom and my dad. These moments, I am able to even be vulnerable to tell her how I'm feeling about the loss of my father.
Okay.
And about the loss of my mother. In this time, and guys, this is not, I didn't do this in year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. I learned this in 2014. I think we had sat with Pastor M, and we were seeking some support, some help, because things, again, I mentioned they weren't going well. And so in 2013, we did that. And I learned that, you know, it's important for me to be able to share some of these things, to be able to speak to her, and now even share my vision to her. She didn't know what my vision was for life. So the woman I was leading didn't know where we were going. No wonder she was frustrated. So I think, you know, teaching myself how to build that emotional intimacy, I have no need, no desire for another woman to know this thing or to seek for it from another woman. So within the context of my relationship, I've set the boundary by spending time with her and learning to talk to her. If you see us nowadays, we are like, you know, a newly married couple. You know, we can laugh with each other, you know, and stuff,
Wonderful. So one of the things that you're actually recommending is being able to connect with your wife at a deeper place. Not forgetting that we as men, and not we men, we cannot be able to connect deeply. It's a struggle for most men. Again, the way we were raised, as Pastor Mbevi says, we were raised not being able to connect, you know, and not being able to interact, even with our wives, you know, to a deeper level. And so that's what I'm hearing from you. We must be intentional, you know, put measures in place for us to be able to connect with our wives. And Pastor Shiramba, the question probably I would want to ask you, you know, men struggle with those connections. You know, how have you yourself been able to build that connection with your wife?
Well, I think it's been different in different seasons of our life. And what we realize is we actually had to educate one another. For example, I had to tell her what respect for me means, and I have to ask her to tell me what love means. So just small little things. So, for example, between here and my house is 15 kilometers, and I drive about twice in a day. I have to come and go, and I do that about 5 days a week. So I almost know where every pothole is and how the road looks like. But I realized that every Sunday I'm with her, because we come with her on Sunday, I realized I would be hitting potholes. and I found that very strange. And so I had to sit with her and tell her, look, I realize that every time I'm driving with you, you keep telling me you're too much in the middle of the road, or you're too much on this side. And so what it did is I realized I became more aware of the road so that I didn't become aware of the road. And I realized that she was no longer respecting me and trusting me with a car when I'm driving her. So I had to try and sit her down and tell her details. And then I had to ask her, what does it mean for me to love you? It's not been easy conversations, because even to these days, we've been married for a long time, and she still tells me, I didn't know about that. Because now it's like a peeling of an onion. You deal with this, and then something else comes. And so probably now, the season I'm in, I'm no longer feeling like I know everything. I just wait for the onion to be peeled by circumstances.
Thank you, Reverend Shiramba. We truly appreciate a round of applause. And I appreciate you being very vulnerable with us, with the kind of journey that you've had with Kanini, and may God bless your marriage. Now to come back to Pastor Mbevi, you've really talked about man and his friends, man as a lover. You know, you've talked about father wounds. And probably there are men here, don't know how, they never grew up with a father. You know, they probably were even abused by their father. And they're at a place where now they have children. And they're wondering, okay, so here are children, so how do I even begin to father them? You know, what do I need to do to father them? And I know you've mentioned some of these things as, you know, as you're speaking, commitment and all these things, you know. But they're probably wondering, okay, those things look like they are so huge. But where do I begin? Because I never knew what a father looks like.
Well, that's a very pregnant question. It can bring out a lot more. But let me just answer it in this way, as I even just pick up from what Reverend Shiramba said. We sit here and we have struggles. And we are men. We are normal. And sometimes we beat ourselves a lot. Say, look at me. What is wrong with me? I would say A, B, C, D. As we, think about reconnecting in our marriages and being better husbands, being better fathers, I think to me it's a learning. It's just realizing we keep learning. As Pastor M said, you're learning to be a father as you continue, as you do the job. You fathered a small child, now I'm fathering someone who's moved out of home. I've never fathered her at that level. So I'm learning. It's just a commitment to say, how am I going to do it? Because it's other-centered. It's not about me. But I want to listen to her and talk with her. ABCDs, whichever those areas are, whether we are dealing with knowing how to father well, dealing with father wounds, dealing with marriage issues, I always use this ABCD. They have helped me. A for admit your challenges. Just agree that I'm not good at this. I need help here. I was hurt by my father. I don't know how to connect with my children. Admit. Because then you can begin to move forward. Before you admit, if pride gets into your head and you can't admit this is an issue, you just keep arguing with your wife. No. Why are you questioning my fathering? Yeah? And you begin to fight with other people, even your children. How dare you say I'm not a good father? Once in a while, I ask my children to evaluate me as a father. And they give it to me real. And recently, my daughter told me, Dad, you're not listening enough. Every preteen will say that. But also listen when they're saying that. Don't dismiss it. So admit. Number 2, boldly face what you need to face. What is it you need to work on? Is it learning how to connect? Do you need someone else to help you do it? Is it creating more times to listen to the other people? Be bold enough as a man to say, I will work on this. Asiyeziba ufa, atajenga ukuta. So begin to deal with the cracks before they bring the house down. C is community. Again, that has been said by all these men. We say in Man Enough, a man is made a man among other men. You can never be a man solo. Can never be a Rambo. That's only to the movies, for the movies. But as you learn from other men, there's one man that I know connects so well with the children. One time I went and sat down with him and said, tell me, how do you connect? And I began to learn from them. Sat down with him when he was with his children and learned some things because I never had a father growing up. He died when I was very young. So I didn't know how to do this well. So C is community. And D is depend on God. I pray about this every day. Lord, help me to be the dad my daughter needs in this season. And sometimes God shows me some things I would never have seen because I believe as a father, he's teaching me as well how to be a good father. So depend on God. Look up to him. How you love your wife. How do you love your children? You need God's help and God's direction and God's, correction. So ABCDs. A for? These men are hungry. Let me see what they had. A for admit. B for be bold enough to face the real issues, including the root issues. C for community. Never walk alone again. Just walk with others and learn. And D for depend on God. There are so many things God has delivered me from because I listened to him. And he said, you're being unkind to your child. Yeah. Or you're being, very selfish towards your wife. So depend on God. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And guys, please, you can go ahead and clap. You can go ahead and clap. Yeah. In a few minutes, we'll be just coming to you in case you have any questions. You can feel free to ask. Mavuno, real men, real people with real issues serving a real God. I hope I've gotten it right, Pastor Emmanuel, you've worked with many relationships, people with real issues and struggles. What are some of the things that you felt have stood out, especially for men, in their relationships? And probably there are things that we need to be aware of as men, even as we go to our relationships. What are some of these things that we really need to be aware of and be cautious about and intentional in dealing with them?
All right, I like this question. It's one of those I could talk about for the whole day. And I'll try to, capture it in one, thing that I've noticed. The first thing I have noticed is that men do not have a person to look up to, a mentor to look up to know what it means to be a man. And I think it becomes easy for us to now grab things from the wayside and go and do, all these other things that we as men think is being manly, which I feel is actually toxic masculinity. I think it's very critical for men to find somebody whom they admire. I think Pastor M said this earlier on. One of the things that I have done is I have looked around me. There is no one who is my age mate. Everyone is older than me, and I look for men who are doing it right. I follow Pastor M. I've seen him do it right quite a bit. There are many things. When you hang out with somebody in the back room or the green room, that's when you get to know the real person. And it's in those moments that I've had nuggets that have made me realize there's a lot I can learn from this person. Pastor S here, is the same. There are many things that he does. And surrounding yourself with people who have gone before, I think is a powerful thing, which men unfortunately, we are taught we can do it on our own. We want to be self-made. It's like it's a title that we hold on to. So we are trying to reinvent a wheel that's already in existence. And all we can do is make it more efficient. So I think as a man, it's important for us to just, one, be very humble. I realize that I don't know. I can't know what I don't know. And it's critical for me to just anchor myself where I can learn and I can follow so that I can be the man that I need to be. But it's important that you find the people who are successful in it and successful with the right values. The men that I have mentioned here, I haven't had a chance to hang out with Reverend Shiramba here yet, but hopefully soon we will hang out.
We can book a date.
I can book a date.
You can book a date.
So, but these are men who, one, love God with everything in them. These are men that serve God with everything in them. They serve God's people with everything in them. And you can see these values trickle down to the families that they have around them. The fact that they can be vulnerable here to share, has given me permission to be vulnerable, to share. Because I know in my vulnerability, there's something that someone here will connect with and they'll learn. And I think we need each other as men, but it's important for us to find the correct mentors or the correct symbols that are doing it the right way, the God way.
Okay. Pastor,
Yeah, can I say
please
something
go
to that
ahead.
question? I think it's a great question. One thing that many men don't know until it's very late is that in your 20s, in your 30s, as you get married, in your 40s, maybe even in the early 50s, you are the one who will have the energy in your marriage. You're the one who has strength. You're the desirable one. You're the one who is building. You're the one who is out there. What you don't know, and this one I discovered, we sat down, I told you we had mentors. So I remember in our 30s, we sat with some older men who are going to their 60s. And they told us this, I thought they were joking. Because they said, a time will come towards your 50s and your mid-50s when the tables will turn. Your wife will have more energy than you. She'll be more attractive than you. She'll be more desirable. She'll have a fuller social life. And you will be home. And at that point, you're the one who will be saying, why are you coming home so late? I was here waiting for you. And then she'll say, I was in Chama, I was in fellowship, I have such and such. And then at that point, her sex drive will actually be the one that's higher than yours. So you're the one who'll be saying, sweetie, I have a headache. Can we just hug today? And they say it's so shocking for many men. That reversal comes. And what happened? Because when you were younger, you felt so powerful, you neglected the woman. And you sort of left her behind. You're like, can she see how busy I am? When that time comes, the model you said, what you sowed, you shall reap. And there are many very miserable men who are left home in their 60s with their wives now full of vitality because they neglected them earlier. So the man said, look after her now and care for her because a time will come when you need her to care for you. I would say that's something, and I know many people are looking at me now and thinking, the young guys are looking at me like, hey, Paul, pussy. But I can tell you, I can already feel it now. My wife has a lot of energy in her 50s. And I can already see, I'm telling her, hey, sweetie, you're everywhere. Can we be home? Which days are our days? The tables start turning. And I'm fortunate that I received the advice, so I did not neglect. This is when you find in the Kenyan context, the children have gone abroad. They already have their children. And then the wife says, in fact, this Muzee is too slow. Let me go and look after my grandchildren. And 6 months, a year later, she's never come back. Because she's just found you're not as interesting, And so I feel like it's so important that we sow into our relationship. The other thing that most men don't know is when you're older, you will actually struggle in retirement and to find the companionship you need if you don't build it now. Yeah. So one of the things that, again, just from following some mentors, I asked, who are the men I want to retire, to surround myself with? Who are some people I want to surround myself with? And I already began to think, when you're in your 80s, it's very hard for you, even if your friend you live here and your friend lives in Ngong. It may look like you're in the same town, but it's very hard to socialize in your 70s, your 80s, when people are far. And so beginning to think now, especially guys when you're in your 30s, 40s, and you're beginning to think, where do I want to build a home with? To even start to think, who do I want to build a home next to? Yeah. So actually start to say, how can I get a few friends of mine and we buy some land together? And start creating our retirement community when we are still in our 40s and in our 30s. So that's something that was advised to us. Actually, right now, we are in the process of finishing some homes that we began to develop almost 10 years ago. And Pastor Emmanuel here is actually going to be my neighbor. And one of the things we realize is even when our wives are in Chama, at least there's a man here we can watch football with in the evening as we wait for them to come back from their active social lives, you know. So who are those people that you be around with? Because again, one of the dangers of old age is loneliness and not having people around you, even though you had them when you had the energy, having those people around you that actually you can have those meaningful relationships. So I think I would say those are the two things many men don't realize until it's too late.
And the interesting thing about it is we always think it's too early.
Yes.
You know, we always think that we have quite
a long runway.
A long run. Yeah. You know, that we don't need to prepare now. And I think it's one of the struggles and the deceptions that we have. You know, the need to prepare for retirement, because it will come.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't know whether there are any questions from the audience. Any questions? Okay. I see there's a question there.
Yeah, so my name is Danko, member of this church. And I have a question that I feel is touching on some of us, if not most of us. And this is the issue of relationships, specifically where blended families are in question. So the question got jumbled up in my head. I had to use ChatGPT, so allow me to read my question from ChatGPT. So,
go ahead, Danko.
As a man navigating the complexities of a blended family, I'm curious to hear perspectives on how fellow men approach balancing responsibilities and building responsibilities or relationships in this unique family structure. What are some of the strategies that either of you have found effective, because you've dealt with families that are blended? In one way or another, some of or most of us here are raising kids that are not biologically ours. And we mess up sometimes, and we don't even know how to handle it as men. We try to be the high priest, we try to hard to be the protector, provider, but sometimes it does not work because we don't understand this complex structure. So anyone, please, that can answer this. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I could say something about that because I've been talking to some group of men, and I've learned a lot from them. But two things. Number one is talk through the issues. A lot of times, as it has been said, as men, we don't talk through some of those issues. We assume some things, we have a difficulty with one of the children, then we don't feel like they're respecting us as they should, and there are sensitivities there. I'm not, the biological father. Should I exercise my authority? And one of the things we did with some of those families was sit down for a full day and talk through the issues. Listen to your wife and what they're saying, and to the other family where the children are. Just listen and really talk through the issues. We talked through the whole day. By the end of the day, there was so much healing, because things that had not been talked about but assumed had come out in the open. And now they were able to say, when you treat that kid that way, I feel like you're being too harsh or you're disrespecting me. And now they were able to talk openly. So I would say open communication is probably the foundation of dealing with all those issues. But then number two, I would say be secure in who you are. I think some of those issues have a way of either attacking your security as a man and feeling like I don't have the right to say something or to be a father or to protect or to correct. But build your security in who you are. And as you play that out, eventually things get to settle down. There's what they talk about as closed spirit. Sometimes some of the children come with a closed spirit. I can't call you dad, you can't do this. And there's a book I read written by, I forget the name. But he talked about breaking the closed spirit. And what he was saying is, just earn your position over time. Don't force it. Just continue to love and serve, and eventually the closed spirit will open. But it may take time, but you just need to be yourself and be consistent and be there. So I think those are a few things I would add to that.
Thank you. You can go ahead, Pastor.
All right. Good afternoon, man. 1, 2, 3.
Ahu.
Yes, thank you for the time. My question would be possibly to all of you. Anyone can answer. But from your interactions with possibly, let me call them like marriage reconciliations, in the Kenyan context, what do you see is the leading cause of broken relationships? And what would you recommend to the single men who are yet to marry, to the very young men who have just married? And what words of caution would you give to those who have been in it for a while? And how, and the second part to it, how would you advise married men to handle secrets that need to be exposed to their partner with the risk for...
The risk factor.
With the risk factor. Is it wise to just die with your secrets, or
confess them to the Lord? Okay, those are two questions in one, Wallace.
Yeah, so can we take another one, or we just respond to those two?
I think let's respond, because those are two questions in one. I think let's respond to it.
I could say, just from experience, and I know all these men here have had just great experience, each of them in counseling in marriage. One of the things we realized is a key issue, even for Christians, is, let me put it this way. So my wife and I wrote a course called Couples and Money. And I know there are some people here who've taken that course. And the whole idea is we realize one of the presenting causes that you hear in a lot of issues, especially when it's couples that have been married, have served in church, so you're wondering what's going on. We found that a presenting issue was just their perspective on money. Very different perspective on money. And so we wrote this course, but within the course we start to address underlying issues within that, because money is what presents. But under the surface, the key issues we found were, one, we don't understand how to deal with our different family backgrounds. The problem growing up is my family teaches me everything I know. And so when I marry her, her family also taught her another way of doing things. And when it comes to an issue like money, we find my way is the right way. I'm tolerating you as I wait to fix you. And that's the approach most of us have in marriage. And so you find at some point you get to a stalemate where it's like, I can't even talk with you about my money, you can't talk with me about yours, so let's just survive. A second one was understanding temperaments. Because we don't understand what our temperaments are, they really harm us. You find that some of us, we want to talk immediately. Let's deal with the issue. The other person is very threatened when you want to do that. They want to go and think first because they can't think as fast as you. Because you don't understand your temperament differences, then the differences become threatening. And then, of course, there are gender differences as well. Men and women process differently. Now, these underlying issues, they tend to be the underlying issues behind most of our marriage issues. And the thing is, God in his creativity did not make us the same. Opposites always attract. So if you're a loud person, you will not attract another loud person, because you will not even be attracted to that person. They're not giving you space to talk. So if you're loud, you'll be attracted to a girl who listens, because what you're looking for in life is an audience. You've always wanted to be listened to. If you're a listener, you're looking for somebody who can give you the content, because you don't want to be the one who talks. So you attract, opposites attract, but then the rule of life is opposites attract and then they attack. Because a time will come when the very thing that attracted you to this person becomes the thing you resent the most about them. And so one of the things that we've tried to do with couples, and I try to do with couples, is to help them see when Jehovah picked that spouse for you, because I believe that as much as you're the one who picked her, God says what God has put together, let no man put asunder. So God is in the mix of that thing. As long as God is there, you need to understand that the differences are put there for your help. And I like to say, if two of us are exactly the same, one of us is unnecessary. So God gave you the thing you need the most. He looked at you as his son and he said, this one is so good, he has this and this. If only he could just have this part. And the problem is the thing you're fighting in your spouse is actually the thing that God knows you need the most. And I feel like for most people, when that perspective begins to shift, I start to see, maybe I thought my husband was a miser. The guy is so tight with money. This guy never even has fun. I hate that about him. And then you're thinking, this woman is a spendthrift. If I even allow her near the money, we'll be broke forever, you know? That's a perspective that's causing you to fight. Then you start realizing, actually, I need a man who can help protect our wealth. Because left to myself, I'll be poor all my life. And the man begins to realize, I need a woman who can help me enjoy life. Because left to myself, I'll have a big bank account and I die with it. And nothing will ever have resulted. Then you start to celebrate the differences. The things that caused you to fight become things that you actually celebrate. So I feel like with every marriage reconciliation, that's a basis where you start by saying, look at the differences. And the differences are usually stark. Then begin to say, why is that difference? You start realizing the difference is there because my perspective is different from yours. And then to say, why do you think God allowed you to have different perspectives? He knew you had them. And then to show why you need this other person's perspective. And I find that most couples who begin to understand that, I remember I used to so resent the differences between me and my wife. I used to think this woman will kill me. You know, she doesn't like, when we got married, she doesn't like having friends over. She wants just to sit down quietly with me in the house. I'm like, what is that? Me, I like being out with people. So I used to feel, you're going to kill me. This is so... Then when I began to discover, my goodness, I'm so shallow. I have 100 friends and I don't even know where they live. You know, I like just... So I realized what she's teaching me is how to go deep with a few friends. And I thank God for that. Yeah. So I start to celebrate the differences as opposed to attack the difference. So I'd say that's for me would be the basis for...
Okay, yeah. So to all those married men here, that lady is the one you needed.
Exactly.
Not anyone else.
Yeah. And when you look for another one, you're going to find that the same problems will recur.
Okay.
You know, if this is what happens when people remarry. And I know some of you who've remarried, you probably have discovered this the hard way. You leave her because she's the problem. You enter another marriage, and then after a little while, you start seeing the exact same problems. And if you're smart enough, you're going to start realizing, oh, the problem is not her, it's me. Because I brought the same problems I had in the last one. And I remember one gentleman telling me, if I had worked as hard as I do with this marriage, in my last marriage, I would still be happily married.
Okay.
And so you don't have to discover it the second time. You can actually discover it with the one you're married with now.
So the other side is not always green. But let me ask Pastor Shiramba, even as I need to release Pastor Mbevi. Pastor Mbevi needs to run somewhere. Please, a round of applause for him even as he leaves. And I know also Pastor M needs to also go. Okay, I think then I don't think we'll have so much time. I think some of these questions, we can take them to the panel because I think I need to release the panelists. So I think just one more question, Reverend Shiramba. Is it okay if we keep our secrets?
Well, I didn't have a microphone, so that it was deliberate, so that I don't answer any question. I can probably just give my own example. We have an agreement with my wife. There are some things I will not share. And the reason being, I know many of you see us as pastors and you think we are always okay in relationships with everybody. But for example, I may have a fight with a staff member. We may be having a fight over some reason. And what I realized is if I share it with my wife, she begins to look at him from a certain perspective. Then what happens is I make up with him at an office level. But she cannot understand how I've made it up with him at an office level. So she continues to look at him from the perspective of this guy the way I probably had told her. Does that make sense? So by the time I've made up with him, it takes so much longer for her to make up with him. So what we agreed with her is there are some things I'll tell you, I am working on this, or we just have an issue and we'll sort it out. So there's the degree and the level of what I'm able to tell her, I have to be wise in how I do it. But in general, there are some things we agree with her, especially certain boundaries that we know if I don't tell her, then I'm endangered. Then she has to know. So if I know he's planning to kill me, she needs to know. So there are certain things that we agree on. Thank you.
Okay. Pastor Emmanuel wanted to say something as we conclude, because I know you people need to leave.
So I think some of the secrets that he may be talking about are, some of those things that would get you in trouble at home.
For sure.
I have learned something that, when God designed marriage or created Adam and Eve, he placed them in the garden and the two were naked and unashamed. That nakedness and unashamed nature was not just a physical nature. It was a holistic, spiritual, emotional, I think it was a holistic thing that God intended for marriage. I have found that telling those secrets has really helped me, because no one can keep me or hold me more accountable than my wife, including I have told my wife the woman that I find attractive.
Oh, wow.
Thank God she looks like her. But I've told her the woman that I found, we can actually be in a room at a party, and she will tell you, I know you've noticed purple, 6 o'clock. Babe, no, I have not. But being open has allowed me to be free. Because now she knows my weaknesses and she can hold me accountable. I think it's how you express it, how you create the environment for it to be disseminated, so that it can be a conversation you have to help the relationship.
Yeah, thank you. And guys, I know we would stay here and discuss about relationships and everything else, but because of time, allow me to just put it at that. Thank you, Pastor M. Thank you, Rev. Shiramba, Pastor Emmanuel. Please, a round of applause for these guys. Thank you, and thank you for being so vulnerable. And may God truly bless you. God truly bless you.